welcome to this week's programme. On today's show, we'll be taking a look at video games. In particular, we'll be investigating the amount of violence that has begun to creep into them recently. Are they just good fun, or are they going over the top in the blood and gore area? Let's take a look at some of the games on offer just now. Kids today can perform a death move such as Jax's arm splice. Take on a race of aliens with a machine gun. Send a host of zombies hurtling down trapdoors. Unload a few rounds of shotgun fire into some mutants. Or they can even destroy a small town. We questioned the owner of a computer store who stocks these type of games. Why do you think that violent games are so popular?
I think with a lot of the young kids, basically 10 and downwards, a lot of the beat 'em up games tend to be licenses of films and cartoons and that kind of thing. It's like Power Rangers is very popular just now, a one-on-one beat 'em up. The only reason the game's popular, it's not a technically good game, but the only reason it's popular is because Power Rangers is flavour of the month just now. I think as you get older it could perhaps be construed as being a release. Instead of going out and punching and kicking somebody, you do get a release yourself by playing these games. It is the same as a lot of people would argue as going to the football and shouting and screaming for 90 minutes. All your built up tensions over the week and what have you can be released in that manner. And of course it keeps it off the streets.
Do you think that violent games have an effect on the children who play them?
Well, if they do have an effect on the children that play these games, I think it must be because the children are basically unsound to start off with. If a kid is going to be influenced to such a degree that he is going to go out and stab somebody or kick somebody in the head, he would have done that anyway, irrespective of video games.
On the new age limits on games, how can we be assured that young children cannot purchase games that would be considered too violent for them?
If, for example, Mortal Kombat was graded 15 or whatever, and a 13-year-old wanted to buy the game and he came into my shop and I says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't sell it to you, you're too young," all he would do is go outside and ask the first 15-year-old that would buy to buy the game. So it would be very, very difficult to actually enforce. Obviously, a lot of it boils down to the individual shopkeepers. If there is a legislative body who will enforce these rules, such as the film censorship, fair enough, but then again, how many 18-year-olds go in and see, or people who aren't 18 go in and see 18 plus films?
So do you agree with the idea of putting age limits on games?
That's a difficult question because there are obviously some games that are far more graphic than others. It's not so much on consoles, your Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, but when you're going on to PC, not necessarily just violence, but there are a lot of games which have a particularly adult theme.
Almost all the leading stores now carry a wide stock of video games where any age of child could purchase a game containing anything from street fighting to decapitations. Some people may argue that the age limits are now being placed on games, but these limits are only there to serve as guides to parents. Only a handful are actually enforced by law. Labels like these are now appearing on games after speculations in the press that Street Fighter 2 and many other video games were considered too violent. The label does not show how difficult a game is, but what the recommended age of the player should be. Though this does show an age limit, a game like Mortal Kombat, which is rated 15, could still be bought by an 8-year-old because at present there is no law being broken. By mid-95, a law will be made similar to that of film classification, where a rating will be given to any video game considered violent, with all other video games receiving a suitable for all classification. Games such as Double Switch, which feature live video and real actors, by law must be classified by the British Board of Film Classification and cannot be sold to anyone under that age. We visited James Watt College in Greenock to find out the views of people in education. Here we talked to Tim Brown, a tutor and guidance officer for the video production department.
Obviously any violence you see on screen does have some kind of effect. I think if video and TV didn't affect people, you wouldn't get advertisers paying millions of pounds just for a 10-second advertising slot. So there must be some influence. However, how big that influence is, it's hard to say.
Have you noticed any violence being shown in the short films that students have made, and do you believe that video games are to blame for this?
There's certainly a fair amount of violence and horror in the films that the students make in the college. Again, you couldn't say that was primarily down to video games. In fact, I would say it's more under the influence of films that are currently on release and films that people see on TV. So no, I wouldn't say video games are responsible for those things, although they may contribute to the general background of violence within society.
Young children are very likely to copy violence they see in video games. Do you think that games should be sold to over 15s or leave it to the discretion of the parents?
I think there should be some kind of licensing or censorship of video games because of the graphic material they portray. Also the fact that from experience, when you start to play computer games, they tend to draw you in sometimes for hours at a time. So watching several hours of concentrated violence is probably bound to have more effect than, say, short snatches of violence within the context of a total film. So I think for video games not to be censored in some kind of way or viewed in some kind of way by some kind of panel to decide, I think is quite a failing in the law, really. I think it would help parents decide whether games are going to be suitable for their children, and then allow them to make a reasoned choice. As it is, what can you do? Just look at the cover and think, is it violent or not? Or the kids have got their own kind of money anyway. They're walking around with wads of tenors in their pockets. Down the shops, they can help themselves to whatever at the moment, and there's no control on that.
To give you an idea of the amount of violent games available in the shops today, we went round the stores and compiled our own top 10 chart. At number 10, blood-sucking ogres stop the visiting girls at the winery estate in the interactive movie Night Trap. Listen to some rock and roll music as you use missiles and exploding mines to win rock and roll racing at number 9. Lay explosive time bombs and run with Mega Bomberman at number 8. And at number 7, another interactive movie. As aliens try to blow up a small town in Texas, you must stop them with their own weapons in Ground Zero, Texas. Fly your helicopter armed with a chain gun, hellfire and missiles, and take out the enemy base in Jungle Strike at number 6. Use your bare knuckles and any baseball bats you find in a fight to the end on the Streets of Rage at number 5. Take control of a platoon and kill the enemy in cannon fodder at number 4. Last person left standing in one-on-one fighting is the winner in Super Street Fighter 2 at number 3. Wandering through dark corridors, you kill monsters with a shotgun and rip them apart with a chainsaw, watching blood fly as you try to survive in Doom at number 2. And the number 1 in our most violent game chart, fighters have the chance to tear their opponent's arms off, set them alight and impale them on spikes, with plenty of blood being splattered in Mortal Kombat 2. The level of video game violence has risen recently and will continue to rise, but video games will soon have a classification so that only the intended player may purchase them. Well, that's all for today. Thanks.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those guts were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they thought it would take expert timing. There was funky Chinaman from funky Chinatown. They were jumping them up, they were jumping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew that part. From a painting to a slip